I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and today we are so privileged to have a very special guest with us today. I am sitting next to Elizabeth Smart. She is an activist, she's a television correspondent, she's an author of the, I believe, #1 New York Times best-selling memoir, My Story. She's also a survivor. In 2002, when she was 14 years old, she was abducted from her home. She was held captive for 9 months. Her new book is called Where There Is Hope, Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. So this book is different from your first book. You talk a lot about your life and your experience in it, but it's also very expansive. You talk to a lot of different people who've gone through a lot of different challenges in their lives. Tell me what made you want to write this kind of story now?
Well, I do a lot of advocacy work, and within that usually means going out and working with survivors, telling my story, doing lots of presentations, talking about things that need to change, things that are changing, etc. And when I do these presentations, a lot of times I'll open it up for a Q&A. And it was interesting because during these Q&As, most of the questions that I were getting, they weren't like the nitty-gritty details of what happened. It was more like, do you deal with anger? Are you ever frustrated? Are you sad over what happened? Do you still feel pain? Where do you find your hope? Where does your inspiration come from? How do you maintain your faith? More sort of broader questions, and I kept getting these questions over and over and over again, that it kind of made me think, there's real interest in this. I think people must be asking not just to ask. I think they're probably looking for answers themselves because, you know, when we take a closer look at our own lives, we all have a story, no matter how different they are. We all come to the table with a story. And so I thought, okay, well, if I were to ever write a book again, I think I'd like to try to address these questions. I think I'd like to try to address these topics. And that got me thinking, I was like, well, could I really write a whole book of me just trying to answer these questions? I don't know if I actually could. And so then I was like, besides, like, my experience is like, they're like, some aspects are not that uncommon. They're pretty broad. Like, for instance, you know, children are kidnapped every single day. People are raped every single day. Like, that's pretty broad, fairly common, but still, you know, it's still a fairly narrow look on the world. If I took this project on, I would want to have a broad reach. What if I went out and I found people that inspire me, people that I look up to, people who are making a difference where they're at and in their world? And so I started compiling lists and lists of people that I wanted to talk to, that I wanted to learn about their story and hear what they think about forgiveness or anger or grief, and get what they said. And then as I started doing that, it just, honestly, it just came together.
It seems like there is this common language of survivorship that even when your experiences are very different, and you talk to people who have gone through grief, who have gone through war, who have experienced disease, who have experienced violence, there is this common language, though, of my life had a before and an after. How do I live in the after? And there are certain themes that come up again and again. And what did you find talking to, these people have such different experiences, and yet there are things that come up again and again with them. What did you find are some of the common things of survivors who really have exhibited resilience and hope?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, you said the word survivor. There's a difference. Actually, I think Diane von Furstenberg in the book said it beautifully. Actually, I think she might have been quoting her mother, but she said, there are two types of people who survive. There are those who don't die, and then there are those who live. And to be a survivor, you are the ones that live. You can continue to be a victim long after the abuse or illness or whatever has ended. But to be a survivor, I think survivor, to me, I'm proud of being a survivor. To me, survivor feels strong. Survivor says, yeah, I did that and I still lived. It didn't break me. I'm still here. I'm not giving up. And so with each one of these survivors, I mean, each one of them felt that same way, that I didn't give up. I didn't just break down. I didn't give in to my struggles or to this monster. I didn't give up. And I think that was one of the things that really played through it. Another thing that also all of the survivors had in common was that it's relationships that help us to move forward. You know, a lot of, unfortunately, in my line of work, in advocacy work for victims of, you know, violent crimes, of kidnapping, of sexual violence, a lot of them, unfortunately, it comes from family members. It comes from people that they know, and that's not fair and that's not right, but unfortunately, that is the norm. Sort of my story is the exception. It's the stranger that's the exception. But I speak with so many people and I talk with so many people and I hear so many stories where, oh, my dad did this, my brother did this, my uncle, my best friend, so on and so forth. And I've just come to realize that family does not always mean blood. Family does not always mean the people who you are biologically connected to. Family means people that care for you, the people that love you, the people who look out for you, the people who are there for you. So sometimes that might be a teacher, it might be a friend, it might be a religious leader, it might be a community member. You have to find your family and hold on to them. And you need to make sure that, and for that family member, that true family member, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well, so that not only being strong for yourself, but being strong for this other person, because you never know when you're going to need that strength.
And you talk a lot about another recurring theme that you definitely talk about experiencing in your own life and then with other survivors, and particularly this one woman I'm thinking of in the book who's a survivor of sexual violence, of setting boundaries around the conversation, and how important it is for all of us to be able to respect each other's need to speak and when we need to be silent, and understanding about giving people that space, because so often in our culture there's so much confusion around these conversations that are really hard. And when someone wants to open up about their experience, you know, you talk about people saying like, oh, we don't want to talk about this. Isn't it unpleasant? But if someone gives you the privilege of talking about their experience, we have to be able to figure out how to hear each other.
It's kind of extremes, because on the one hand, yeah, you absolutely do have those people like, oh, well, you know, like, well, like, let's stay away from that. That's, you know, like, don't want to hurt you, don't want to talk about these dark, scary things. And then we've got the people on the other end of the spectrum where I think most people, it comes from a place of natural curiosity, but they want to know, and they can sometimes be overbearing and insensitive in asking their questions, in wanting to know. And they come out asking questions like, well, you know, why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? And from the outside, from someone who doesn't know, that might seem like a perfectly innocent, acceptable question. But for a survivor who hears that, I mean, I've been asked that. That's probably one of the most common questions I get asked is, you know, why didn't you run? And I feel like it's important for me to answer that because I can, because I know why I didn't run, and I know that I have a network of people behind me that I can turn to when I need their strength, when I don't feel strong enough to keep going myself. But not all survivors have that. So I feel like it is important for me to answer that. And I know that this answer would be the same, not just coming from victims of kidnapping and sexual violence, but I'd venture to say even, you know, domestic abuse and domestic violence. It's not that we didn't want to run. It's not that I didn't want to run. It's not that I didn't want to be rescued. It's not that I didn't want to be saved, because I absolutely did, more than anything in the world. But you get into the survival mode where you're doing absolutely everything you can to survive. And it's taking 100% of your energy and your focus just to make it through another day. So to think of trying to outrun my captor, or break through a metal cable, that wasn't really an option for me. My captors, they seemed invincible. You know, they broke into my home, the place that's like safest on earth to me, the place that's sacred to me, my refuge. And yet he broke in there and no one stopped him. He kidnapped me at knife point and nobody stopped him. Took me up into the mountains behind his home. Nobody stopped him. Raped me. Nobody stopped him. Chained me up. Nobody stopped him. I mean, he just became this invincible person that no one could stop him. So when he'd threaten me and say, if you ever run, if you ever scream, if you ever do anything that I don't want you to do, I will kill you. And if I don't kill you, I'll kill your family. So, I mean, those threats were very real. And then, you know, that coupled with all of these actions of no one ever stopping him, no one ever protecting me, no one ever stepping in between him and me, I mean, it just felt like he would. There was no question in my mind that he would. And I know that that's the same for so many survivors. They don't actually hear that natural curiosity. What they hear is, you didn't try hard enough. You should have run. You should have done this. That would never happen to me because I'd run, I'd scream, I'd yell. And the truth is that you don't know. Until you're in that situation, you don't know what you do. It's nice to think that you would run. It's nice to think that you would scream or fight back or do something. But until you're there, you do not know.
And the power of abusers is so, it's not just physical, it's so psychological. And what you're talking about, I hope that over the last several months we have seen a bit of a shift in that conversation around that kind of power and around that kind of abuse of power in all different kinds of dynamics, where the focus is becoming less on the person who survived it and endured it and more on the perpetrators.
I think we are starting to see some change, but I also think that whenever there's any highly publicized scandal or crime or whatever, and it's a victim coming forward saying, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, we immediately start looking at that victim and being like, well, you know, you dress kind of provocatively. Oh, what's that? You were a stripper in your past life? Oh, well, yeah, we're not going to take you so seriously because, well, I mean, come on, like, that's your background. What did you expect? And that really infuriates me because every victim deserves the dignity and respect to have their story told the way that they see fit without being scrutinized because of maybe what they've done for a living in the past or what they do now or, you know, how they present themselves. Like, I don't know, I just find it very disheartening to think that we still can't get beyond the outer exterior.
Right, and the default being looking at the person who has had something done to them rather than the person who has done the act.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I said, I remain hopeful that we are tipping the scales a little bit, but we definitely still have a really, really long way to go. One of the other things you talk about in the book is the different mechanisms that people use, and one of the ones I feel is really important, and I want to make sure we talk to today is service. Is that almost everyone that you speak to, and you certainly are an example of this, that part of this ongoing dialogue that people who survive the insurmountable, you know, seemingly insurmountable have, is how do I then give back? And that seems to be a really important component of your own healing and an important component of the healing of so many of the people you talk to. Why do you think that makes a difference?
I think it makes a huge difference, and to me, it's almost what sets a victim apart from a survivor. And it may not be out on a big grand stage. It may not be a huge public act. But, I mean, I think realizing that you're not the only person in the world who's been through something and changing kind of your outlook from what's happened to you, from being the victim to, from this woe is me, this has happened to me, to this has happened to me, now I'm going to do something about it, I think really does kind of make that shift into moving forward with your life. One person that I interviewed that she just is so amazing to me and completely blew my mind was Norma Bastidas. I mean, she went through horrific things and then, you know, didn't have the support that she deserved. And she talks a lot about work that she's done since then. But now she said, you know, my next step is that, you know, I've been on the victim side. I've listened to victims. I've worked with victims. You know, I've tried to make a difference. And she's like, I feel like
she's a victim of sexual trafficking and sexual abuse.
She's like, I feel like I understand this side really well. And she's like, But she's like, I just applied for a job to work in the prisons with the sex offenders. And she's like, I want to understand their side now. And I remember when she said that to me, I think my jaw hit the floor. I about fell over. I remember thinking, Norma, are you for real? Like, really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, because I want to understand it. I want a greater knowledge of it. And it just blew me away, because I don't know if I'm a big enough person to do that. Actually, no, I'm not a big enough person.
You're plenty big, Elizabeth.
That thought
you're big
of going
enough.
into the prisons and working with the people who, in my mind, commit the worst crime you can possibly commit. I don't know.
But later on, I was thinking when you were talking about that, about how very late in the book, I think it's the last chapter when you talk to Mandy Patinkin, and he says something about how I feel better when I'm doing something. And that the act of doing something and taking a step forward is part of what helps us move on from these things. And you never move on entirely. There's no such thing as closure, really. It's just a shifting relationship with the traumas of the past, and being able to give to others who are in that same place. It feels like a common theme. And another thing that you talk about, which is very surprising, is being able to find your sense of humor again and again in these situations. And you talk about being able to laugh with your family and how important that has been. Why do you think that matters?
Well, looking at my life, overall, I've had a pretty great life, but it would be very easy to just get swallowed up in the 9 months that I was kidnapped. And then any time a tabloid said something nasty about me, or someone made a degrading kind of comment, or saying, oh, that's all she's ever going to be, like, can't she just move on? Like, really? Like, it's been how many years now and she's still holding on to this? Like, if I held on to every one of those comments that I ever read or ever heard or someone ever said to me, my life would be a pretty sad place. It would be hard to get up. It would be hard to find faith in humanity. But being able to laugh about it and just go on, being able to joke about it and just, let it roll off my back, I can do that. And I can keep on going.
And continue to be of service to others and inspire. Your story is so amazing, but one of the true joys of reading this book was hearing and just reading so many different accounts from so many different kinds of people who, from Holocaust survivors to war survivors to sexual trafficking survivors to people who face cancer. It's very inspiring, and there's so much hope and so much resilience in this story and in yours. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming in today. It's been such a pleasure. The book, it's brand new. It's called Where There Is Hope. I want to get the full title right. Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. It's a good 3-point plan for you. It is out this week. Please tune into all of Salon TVs by liking Salon on Facebook and opting in for notifications. You will get updates